When was the last time a customer complained to your company, not about your product, not about your service team, but about a bill, about a refund that never arrived, about a pricing change that never saw it coming, about a fee that felt like a trap? I'll bet it was recently. I'll bet it happens more than you would like to admit. Now, here's the follow up question: who in your organization owns that problem? If your answer was the customer service team or the CX function or operations, I gently push back because in most of the organizations I've studied and worked with, those complaints have a deeper origin. They begin not at the front line, but in finance. Welcome back. I'm Hitesh, and every week on this show, we pull back the curtain on the internal machinery of organizations, the functions, the processes, the decisions that most people never associate with customer experience. And we ask, how do these internal layers shape what customers actually feel? Today, we're going inside the finance function, and I want to make a case, a rigorous evidence based case, that finance is either your greatest customer experience asset or your single biggest liability. And that the difference between these two outcomes is almost entirely a matter of choice. This one is for you. If you lead a team in finance, in operations, in CX, in general management, the insights from this episode apply wherever you sit. What we are really talking about is organizational alignment, and that's everyone's job. Let's get into it. Let me describe a scene that plays out in organizations every single day. A company invests significantly in its customer experience program. They hire a chief customer officer. They run journey mapping workshops. They redesign their contact center scripts. They roll out a new digital self-service portal. NPS goes up. Leadership congratulates itself. And then 6 months later, the complaints start rolling in. Customers are angry about a new billing format they don't understand. A refund policy has changed and nobody told them. A new pricing tier was introduced, designed in finance, approved by leadership, and the first time customers heard about it was on their invoice. The CX team scrambles. The contact center gets overwhelmed. NPS crashes. And someone in the executive team asks, what happened to our customer experience program? What happened is that finance made decisions, legitimate, commercially rational decisions, without anyone modeling the downstream impact on customers. And the CX function had no visibility, no seat at the table, no mechanism to flag the risk before it became a crisis. That is the finance CX blind spot, and it exists in the majority of organizations I've encountered. Think for a moment about where finance decisions actually show up in customers' life. Pricing decision. Finance owns this. How products and services are bundled, tiered, and priced determines whether a customer feels respected or manipulated at the moment of purchase. Billing accuracy and clarity. Finance owns the systems, the processes, and the standards, and billing errors are consistently among the top 3 drivers of customer complaints and churn across industries. Not product failures, billing. Refund and credit policies. Finance sets the rules. Those rules determine whether a dissatisfied customer can be recovered or whether they walk and take 10 others with them. Capital allocation. Finance decides which technology investments get funded, which system upgrades happen, which CX capabilities actually get built. When your customer service agents can't see a complete customer record because 3 systems don't talk to each other, that is a finance decision somewhere upstream. And payment terms, credit check processes, invoice communication, all finance touchpoints that customer experience directly. Finance doesn't just fund the customer experience. In most organizations, it actually shapes it, for better or for worse. The question we need to be asking as leaders is whether that shaping is intentional or accidental, whether it's designed with the customer in mind or whether the customer is an afterthought. Let me take you through 3 real-world cases that illustrate exactly what I mean. Let's talk about commercial aviation. specifically American Airlines. Over the course of the 2010s, major US carriers and American was among the most aggressive, pursued a strategy called ancillary revenue generation. The idea was straightforward: unbundle the flying experience and charge separately for components that used to be included. Check baggage, seat selection, priority boarding, change fees. Does it remind you of the pain? From a pure finance perspective, this was a masterclass. Ancillary revenues across major use carriers grew from under $3 billion in 2012 to over $12 billion in 2019. A revenue stream essentially created from thin air, or more accurately, from things that used to be free. But here's what the P&L didn't capture. Every one of those fees was a customer experience decision as much as it was a financial one. And they were designed with one lens, revenue optimization, without the other lens, customer impact, ever being applied with the same rigor. What happened? You'd see a fare advertised at a certain price, click through, and by the time you've added your bag, chosen a seat that wasn't in the middle of the last row, and paid a change fee when your meeting got rescheduled, the actual cost bore almost no relationship to what you thought you were buying. J.D. Power's annual airline satisfaction studies became a running chronicle of this. Fee complexity and pricing opacity were consistently among the top cited sources of passenger dissatisfaction. Not the flights themselves, the financial experience around the flights. And here's the part finance leaders need to hear. Customers who feel financially deceived don't just churn. They become our most vocal critics. Social media, review platforms, conversations at dinner. The dissatisfied passenger tells that story over and over again. Now, and this is important, I'm not arguing that ancillary fees are inherently wrong. There's a legitimate business model there. What I'm arguing is that those fees were designed without a CX co-author. Finance ran the revenue modeling, nobody ran the trust modeling. American Airlines eventually redesigned its fare families and its loyalty program. Clearer value tiers, simpler structures, but it did so only after significant revenue damage, reputation damage, and years of customer defection had accumulated. The recovery cost far more than giving CX a seat at the table during the original pricing design would have. For leaders listening, the moment finance proposes a new pricing structure, fee, or billing model change, that is the moment CX needs to be in the room, not to veto, to model, to answer. What will customers feel? What will they do? And what will that ultimately cost us? And even to find a solution for that. Second case moves us from pricing to billing. And it's a story about what happens when the systems finance owns, like billing infrastructure, payment processing, account management, are treated as back office utilities rather than customer touchpoints. In 2014 and in 2015, Vodafone UK found itself at the center of a regulatory and reputational storm. And the cause wasn't network performance. It wasn't handsets. It wasn't the customer service team's tone or empathy levels. It was their billing. Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator, recorded a dramatic and sustained spike in complaints about Vodafone. Customers were being charged for services they had never activated. Promised credits weren't appearing on accounts. Billing errors were taking months, in some cases 6 months or more, to resolve. And when customers called in, agents often couldn't see what had gone wrong because data was fragmented across incompatible systems. Ofcom eventually fined Vodafone £4.6 million. At the time, one of the largest fines the regulator had ever issued. What had gone wrong? The root cause was a billing platform migration, a finance and IT project that had not been adequately stress tested against the full complexity of live customer data. The new system worked in the testing environment. It didn't work at scale with real customer accounts and real edge cases. And here's the structure of failure underneath the technical one. Finance owned the billing infrastructure. Customer operations owned the complaints. Customer experience owned satisfaction metrics, but nobody owned the intersection. Nobody had joint accountability for what customers actually experienced when the billing system touched their lives. The result was predictable in hindsight. A project categorized as an internal systems migration, an IT and finance matter, turned out to be one of the most consequential customer experience events in the company's recent history. Billing is not a back office administrative function. For most customers, the invoice or statement is the single most frequent, most tangible interaction they have with your company and your brand. Think about that for a moment. Not your app, not your store, not your helpline. For a large portion of your customer base, the bill is the relationship. When it's wrong, confusing, or late, that is not a minor operational error. That is the relationship breaking down. Vodafone's recovery required finance, tech, and customer experience to co-own a remediation roadmap. They introduced dedicated billing experience roles, finance professionals with CX accountability. They created shared metrics that measured billing accuracy alongside satisfaction scores. All of that infrastructure, had it existed at the outset, would have prevented the crisis. The systems migration would still have happened, but it would have been designed with customer consequences in view, tested against customer outcomes, and governed with customer impact as a success criteria. Now, here's the lesson. When finance runs a major systems project, billing, ERP, payment processing, the question, what does this mean for customers, must be hardwired into the governance from day one, not added after the complaints start arriving. All right, let's get practical, because that's what this show is for. Not just diagnosis, but tools you can actually use. Based on everything we've covered, the research, the case studies, the patterns I see across industries, and I'm sure you see them too, I want to walk you through what I call the Finance CX integration framework. 6 pillars. Each one is something you can start on this week. First one is the map finance touchpoints. Identify every intersection between a finance decision and the customer journey. Do this as a joint exercise with finance and CX in the room together. Make the invisible visible. Second one is CX impact scoring. Before any significant financial policy change is approved, require one-page CX impact assessment. How many customers affected, projected complaint volume, estimated churn risk. Third pillar, shared metrics. Create KPIs that finance and CX own together, like cost to resolve, revenue at risk from churn, customer lifetime value by policy segment. Shared metrics produce shared behavior. Next is the fourth one, CX in finance governance. Ensure your CX lead has standing participation in finance planning cycles. Not a courtesy seat, a working seat with data and a voice. Fifth pillar in the list is billing experience standard. Treat your invoice as a design customer artifact. Set standards for clarity, error rates, resolution timelines, and language. Finance owns accuracy, CX owns clarity. Both own the outcome. And the last pillar, quarterly finance CX review. A standing strategic conversation, not a complaints report, where finance and CX leadership examine which financial policies generated the most customer friction last quarter and what adjustments are warranted. Let me give you a bit more texture on a few of these, because I don't want them to feel abstract. For example, pillar 2, the CX impact assessment, is probably the highest leverage intervention on this list. It doesn't require a restructure. It doesn't require new headcount. It requires one additional question in your approval process. What will customers experience as a result of this decision? That question, asked consistently, changes the quality of financial decisions in ways that are almost impossible to overstate. Second one is, let's discuss the pillar 3, shared metrics, is where the cultural shift really happens. When finance is measured only on cost reduction and CX is measured only on NPS, you'll always have misalignment. When both functions share a metric, say cost to resolve a billing complaint, which captures the operational cost, the retention risk and the reputational cost together, you create a common language, and common language leads to common decisions. And pillar 6, the quarterly finance CX review, is the feedback loop that makes everything else sustainable. Without it, you're running the other 5 pillars without ever checking whether they are working or not. You don't have to implement all 6 at once. If you do nothing else from this episode, start with pillar 1. Map the touch points. Make the invisible visible. Everything else follows from that. I want to leave you with a reflection. The organizations that will win on customer experience in the next decade are not the ones with the most sophisticated journey maps or the most empathetic frontline teams, though both of those things do matter. They are the organizations that understand customer experience as an enterprise discipline, that recognize finance alongside operations, HR, technology, and every other internal function as a co-author of what customers feel. The companies that make that shift don't just get better customer scores, they get a structural competitive advantage that is very hard to copy because it lives inside the operating model, not just the service delivery layer. Finance and CX working in genuine partnership don't produce a compromise. They produce a competitive advantage. Here's your action prompt for this week. 1 conversation. That's all I'm asking. Arrange a meeting between your finance lead and your CX lead. Or if that's you, set it up with your counterpart. Don't put a big agenda on it. Just ask one question together. Where does finance touch our customers, and are we happy with what they experience? What comes out of that conversation may be the most valuable insight your organization generates this month. Until next week, keep looking inside the organization because that's where the customer experience is really built. As I keep on saying it, broken processes deliver broken experiences. Thanks for listening to my podcast. If you found this insightful, please subscribe, share, and check out my recent article on this topic on LinkedIn. As always, feel free to get in touch with me with comments, suggestions, and ideas. I'm Hitesh, and I'll see you next time.